So, hi everyone, and welcome to the new edition of You Are My Borough with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a quick look back at the Borough's last couple of games, more specifically, of course, the weekend one at Luton. We're obviously heading into the international break now, so it seems a good opportunity to kind of take stock of just where Borough are at, where the squad's at, injuries, obviously, what Borough have coming up next, and obviously that last little chunk of the season. A few things before we start. I want to apologise for my incredibly croaky voice. While Borough were getting back on track by beating QPR last week, and Dom was watching them at the Riverside, I was going to say 6 sheets to the wind. I don't know what I was. I had a couple of days at Cheltenham, standing outside, drinking Guinness, cheering on some losers, some winners, I've got to say as well. But that's absolutely knackered the throat. So that's why I sound like this. Little bit of housekeeping before we do start. If you're watching on YouTube, then please like, subscribe. That massively helps us. Drop us any comments. Let us know what you think about Borough's chances for the rest of the season. If you're listening on the various podcast platforms, then rate and review. Right, Dom. So you were at QPR, you were at Luton. Where's that left Borough? Where are we now heading into the last international break of the season?
By the way, you sound positively healthy compared to what you did on Friday. Imagine the apologies you'd have had to have been dishing out.
That was a mess at the back end of last week. Yeah, exactly. I'm nearly on the mend.
Yeah. Where are we now? Well, it's as you were in terms of the table. It's as you were from the weekend, isn't it? From before the weekend. Obviously, Borough drew at Luton, but results around them were fairly positive. So they remain 3 points off now down.
And that's kind of been the story of the last few weeks, hasn't it? Really, nobody, Coventry have been on that little bit of a run, but nobody really seems to want to grab hold of this.
Well, we'll get into the championship picture. Once we've obviously talked specifically about Luton and the various talking points come from that. But I think we're getting to the point, and this sounds ridiculous because Coventry are 2 points clear of 7th. I think it's highly unlikely Coventry don't finish in the top 6 now. It kind of increasingly feel more like it might be a 4 or 5 team battle for one spot, doesn't it? Rather than 7 for 2. But we'll get to that. We'll talk about that.
Let's talk Luton then. You were at Kenilworth Road, the glamour that is the Kenilworth Road, the good old Kenny. I mean, 1 point gained, 2 points lost. One of those days. What was your take on it? It wasn't the best game in the world. Let's not beat around the bush.
I thought Carrick's verdict was telling, really. And he made the point himself of saying, you don't hear me say this very often. In fact, he said, I might never have sat here after a game and said it, but we take the point, which is code for, Christ, let's get the point and absolutely leg it. Luton will feel aggrieved that they didn't get all 3. Matt Bloomfield agreed when it was put to him that it was a travesty that they didn't get all 3 after the game. For the first half, especially. Were they excellent? Were Borough dreadful? Probably a mix of both. I agree with Carrick that it's a good point. I think it's a good point because, yes, Luton, second bottom in the table, and have had a wretched season and are looking probably increasingly likely to go down. But they are scrapping for their lives. Kenilworth Road is not a pleasant place to play. I think the game at Swansea a week earlier was a far more appealing away game than the game at Luton. And Borough were rubbish on Saturday for the first half, especially. Borough were dreadful. So how often this season have we talked about an inability to get something from games when they've deserved them? Never mind, get something from games when they haven't deserved them. So yes, they were fortunate at times, and Luton made a mess of a few clear-cut chances. But I do think Borough deserve some credit for taking a point in a clean sheet at Kenilworth Road, especially when you consider how ravaged the defence was.
I was just going to say that. Because, you're absolutely right. We've kicked Borough on a number of times this season for being far too soft-centred, tossing points away. Well, Saturday's game, the way it was panning out, was the perfect opportunity for them to do that. And like you say, if there is a pat on the back, it's the fact that they dug in and they did prevent Luton from scoring. They did manage to get out with a point without a centre half, which you know, fair play to Jonny Howson, fair play to Neto Borges. They've stood up in the last couple of games.
100%. On the flip side, Boro didn't have a shot on target.
Yeah.
And when you're in a position
Yeah.
where you're needing to win games, you're needing to win games to reach that points tally we've talked about, to get in the top 6, to stay in the top 6. And when you look at the fixtures Boro have remaining, that is one of the games that you looked at and thought, wow, could really do with going and winning there.
Yeah.
They didn't show any real attacking intent or ambition until the last 5-10 minutes. When I asked Carrick whether there was any regret that there wasn't any more of that earlier on, he immediately said, no, I'm not going to criticise the players today. We knew it was going to be tough. We felt like it was a dig deep game, but you can't help but feel a little bit underwhelmed when you leave a game against a side second bottom in the division and you haven't managed to test the keeper. Which I think, for all I agree, it's a good point. I think the upshot is it just further raises the doubts of, are Boro good enough to get into top 6? Are Boro good enough to string the runs, to string the run of wins together that they're going to need? Are Boro good enough to go up this season?
Well, when we talk an attack, Iheanacho, if you listen on a podcast here, I'm there kind of pulling a face at this point. Iheanacho.
Yeah, he was poor. I thought he was lucky to last the full 90 minutes. I was surprised when Conway went off. Conway's played a lot of football since he's come back from his hamstring problem. But I'm sat there in the second half, and Carrick delayed his subs again, which again I think was an indication that he was happy with what he had, rather than let's not risk leaving empty-handed. Maybe he won't say it, but maybe he was stung by the amount of games this season Boro have managed to throw something away. But I was surprised that it was Conway who went off rather than Iheanacho.
I mean, there's still time for Iheanacho to work. He could still be the player that fires Boro to promotion. As we sit here, though, at the minute, I mean, he was never signed as the replacement for Latala. That's unfair to Boro. He wasn't that. But he's still the striker that's come in when their leading scorer has gone out. And goodness gracious me, he looks a long way off, doesn't he?
Yeah, he looks a way off, doesn't he? And you've got 8 games left to play. You've got Whittaker there on the bench. You've got McGree to come back at some point. It's probably unlikely we're going to see Dork, or if we do, it's going to be very, very minimal at the end of the season. But you've got attacking players to come back in. It feels like he'd be fortunate to keep his place in the team for that Oxford game after the break. You see flashes, don't you? You see flashes. You can see the player he is. But he just doesn't look up to speed, and he just hasn't had the impact you'd have hoped for. I mean, Carrick clearly has gone out of his way a few times, hasn't he, to praise the character, to talk about how impressed he's been behind the scenes. I don't think there's any doubt in that. There's no doubt in the character of the player who's come in. He just hasn't made any sort of an impact, has he? And like you say, when you come in to replace, even if Carrick downplayed the fact that it was a direct replacement, when you come in as the only striker, when your top scorer's left, you hope for more, don't you?
Yeah. And I think the problem is, and again, this is probably very, very simplistic, and I'm sure Carrick would completely laugh this off, but I think there's something in it. As a fan, if you're watching Tommy Conway, then okay, it might not be working for him in a specific game, but you know what you're going to get from him. He's going to harry and hassle the centre halves. He's going to run the channels. He's going to want the ball. He's going to try and make things happen, even if they're not really happening. The problem with Iheanacho at the moment is if it's not happening for him, it just looks like he's wandering about, doesn't it? Like, there's no intensity, there's no urgency, there's no real contributing to Boro's press. And at a time when the team is not really clicking, that kind of stands out, doesn't it? That side of things.
It does, yeah. And I felt for Conway on Saturday because he was just completely starved of any sort of service. Bergzorg slightly improved in the second half. Similar to what you're saying there, really. Even when Bergzorg has a bad game or has an ineffective game, there's pace and there's purpose and there's direct running at the defence, isn't there? Whereas Iheanacho doesn't have that. And I think to a similar extent, Azaz, never would you question Azaz's desire or anything like that.
No.
The type of player he is, when it's a difficult game for a forward, he probably stands out more, doesn't he? He probably stands out more for doing little in a game, and I think Iheanacho's similar to that. A word though, if we're talking about January signings, fair play to Willing Jr. It was difficult for him at times, but to come in, having played Champions League football at the start of the season, he's a winger. Yes, he's played wing back and full back, but he's not a wing back or a full back. He was listed on the England under-21s squad last week as a forward, and there he is playing left back for Boro at Kenilworth Road. Fair play to him for the way he's adapted to that, I think.
I mean, it feels like the break is probably coming at a good time for Boro, doesn't it? If nothing else, just to try and get some defenders back. I mean, you obviously spoke to Carrick before and after the game. You know, there was still no Vandenberg, still no Fry, still no Edmondson, still no Ayling. Where are we at with those, do you think? And who, if any, are likely to be available for that Oxford game straight off the back after the break?
Well, Carrick said he thinks Vandenberg's closest, but he did say, look, I've said this before and I've been wrong, and I've given you kind of rough estimates before, and I've been wrong. So he was kind of reluctant to put an exact time frame on it or to commit to it. But Vandenberg, he suggested, was closest. Still don't really know the extent of Dale Fry's problem, but it's certainly, the indications certainly are that it's serious. So you would expect Fry to be pretty close. On
the grass, he might be on the grass.
On the grass, which McGree seems to have been for a while now. He's said about all three of them, hasn't he, separately, that he hopes to have them back, if not for the first game back after the international break, then not long after. What I would say, and as ridiculous as this sounds, if none of them are back for that Oxford game, I don't think it's an absolute disaster.
No.
If you're playing Leeds, then you'd say, hold on, really, you could do with a centre-back playing at centre-back. Howson and Borges, I mean, Jonny Howson, we spoke to Carrick about Howson after the game on Saturday, and I'm sure you'll have read or seen or heard Carrick saying he still hasn't taken part in a single training session,
which is incredible, really, isn't it?
And it was on the tip of my tongue. Do I ask the contract question? And I thought, no, it's too early. It's too early to go there. But it is, like, as ridiculous as it sounds, and clearly he's played nowhere near enough football, or nowhere near as much football as he'd want this season. But even in the last week alone, he's just shown, hasn't he, just how much he still has to offer.
Yeah, well, that's it. Absolutely. I mean, Boro, if he wasn't there, Boro would have really, really been in serious trouble in this last fortnight, wouldn't they? You know, he's dug them out of a hole. If Boro can scramble their way into the playoffs, if Jonny Howson doesn't do anything else between now and the end of the season, wants to get everybody back, just being there for these two games and being able to slot in and being able to hit the ground running, that's the other thing, isn't it? There's not many players, like you say, that could barely have kicked a ball all season, not trained, and yet go and play two games somewhat out of position in a week and just about be the best player in the team in both of them.
And I think also there are many players who a manager could trust, having not trained and having not played for 4 months, to say, yeah, I'm going to put you in a position you've played a few times in your career, but no more than that. I know it's early, but Howson contract and Dijksteel out of contract as well in the summer. What do you reckon there? What would you do there?
I mean, so first of all, let's make the assumption that we're talking about Boro as a championship club, because clearly that's, if Boro are in the Premier League, then I don't think either of them get a contract, do they? If they're in the championship, I mean, the value in both players is their versatility, isn't it? And we've seen how important that is in the championship in the last few weeks. It wouldn't surprise me. Dijksteel's slightly different because Howson, Boro offer him a 1-year contract. He either says yes or says no. It will never be anything more than a 1-year contract. Clearly, Dijksteel is going to want more than a 1-year contract. He's not at the stage of his career where he would be willing to accept that. So if you're Boro, do you want Dijksteel on a 3 or 4 year contract, which you would probably get at a bottom-end championship club? I don't know. You know, I like Dijksteel. I think he's done a very good job at times for Boro. There's obviously been other times when various managers haven't fancied him. I think if you're being absolutely brutally harsh, if you have aspirations of being a championship club that's going to finish in the top 2, you probably want better than Anthony Dijksteel as your right back. like I say, I think Howson's slightly different because you're only talking about a 1-year deal. If Jonny Howson's there, then even by dint of his leadership, his influence in and around it, if he only plays the number of games he's going to end up playing this season, you can definitely make the argument that it's still worth giving him a 1-year contract. It's a very different argument with Dijksteel if you're talking a much longer contract and you're really needing him to be your first or second choice right back. I don't know. I think Boro might want an upgrade there. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. And I think Aylin's going to be moving into the last year of his contract. So it feels like in a summer, and we won't talk about this now because it's a video we'll do, I think, on its own as a standalone video in weeks to come. But it already feels like we're actually talking rebuild territory again, doesn't it? Ahead of the summer. And
well, I mean, yeah, like you say, there is a whole new video, but clearly no Doak. You're not going to sign Iheanacho, so you're going to need a frontline centre forward. There's going to be the question marks if Boro don't go up around Hackney, around Vandenberg. What's going to happen with Travers? Who's your goalkeeper? Massive questions all the way through the team. I think, yeah.
And with that in mind, you've got one of your right backs who barely played really before this season, out of contract, and another right back who's had a poor season, let's be honest, Luke Aylin, with 1 year left. It feels like it might be a good opportunity to say, right, this is time to move on in that position. What you would say, though, is Dijksteel has given Boro two things, really. Dijksteel's given Boro a decision to make, which absolutely, I don't think we'd have been sat here thinking that would be the case last summer, for example. And the other thing is, if Dijksteel wasn't to stay at Boro, if he was to go elsewhere, he's going to have a hell of a lot more offers or more appealing offers, you would think, than he would have done last summer had he moved then. So fair play to him for the way he's played this season. I think he's had a really good season in the circumstances.
Right, let's have a look then at the table. Let's have a look at it and let's fire a few little things at you. So Leeds top 80 points. Sheffield United second, 80 points. Burnley third, 78 points. Very much feels like that's your promotion battle. Who's going to finish top two out of them three?
I think Leeds and Sheffield United. But Leeds are having a bit of a wobble. What, one win in the last?
Are Leeds falling apart again?
Yeah, like 1 win in 4 is a wobble, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think it's any more than that. But I think I'd go. I think Leeds are the best team in the division. I think I'd go Leeds and Sheffield. What about you?
I'm going to go Leeds and Burnley.
Right.
But I'm with you. If there's one team in there who could completely implode, it would be Leeds. Yeah. But I'm going to go Leeds and Burnley. Sunderland are fourth, 69 points. They're 11 points behind second, but they're 12 points above sixth. It feels like Sunderland are heading for that horrible end of the season like Boro had 2 seasons ago, where they're in the playoffs. They're clearly in the playoffs. They've got nothing to play for in the last 3, 4, 5 games. Do you rest players? Do you take the foot off your gas? Do you try and keep momentum? Do you try and stay in form, but maybe get players injured? Boro went wrong with it 2 years ago. I think with the benefit of hindsight, Carrick would probably do things a bit differently now, obviously leading into that Coventry playoff game. It's a nasty little situation for Sunderland to be in, isn't it?
It's playoff purgatory, isn't it? 11 behind, 12 ahead. I don't think...
Playoff purgatory, there's something that we're going to be writing, Dom. I'll have that.
Yeah, make a note. I think, clearly we won't labour the point on Sunderland because I suspect most of the fans watching this will not want us to labour the point on Sunderland. But I think Regis Labrise last week was talking about how... they still have the desire. They still want to finish the season positivity. It's more a subconscious thing, I think, isn't it? When you get to that position, when you know realistically you're not going to catch automatic, when you know it isn't kind of do or die. I think Sunderland are going to finish fourth. The problem is, for Sunderland, they, as things stand, they play Coventry in the playoffs. Well, Coventry thumped them at the weekend. Yeah. Coventry looked like a team only going in one direction. And we'll go back to what I said at the start. I think Coventry are going to finish fifth, which I think then leaves you with West
Right,
Brom.
well, let's have a look. So Coventry at the minute are 5th on 59. You're putting your neck on the block straight away and saying they're going to finish either 5th or 6th. So
I think
should we
Coventry will
leave
finish
Coventry at the minute
5th.
out of this next equation? Because of all the sides that Boro are battling against, Coventry are by far and away in the best form of all of them. You know,
Yeah, and Boro there on the final. I mean, the hope for
Yeah.
Boro might well be that Coventry are already in.
playoff purgatory.
Yeah. Why do I have a feeling we've got the name of this video on pod?
Exactly. Right, so below Coventry, here we go. 6th place, West Brom, 57. 7th place, Bristol City, 57. 8th place, Boro, 54. 9th place, Blackburn, 52. 10th, Watford, 52. 11th, Millwall, 51. 12th, Sheff Wed, 51. Take your pick. Choose your weapon. I mean, goodness me. That's going to... I'm looking at all of those teams, and the one thing that I would say for Boro, and we've been fairly down on Boro's playoff prospects for the last month or so, I don't think any of them are any better than Boro or any more likely to string together 3 or 4 wins on the trot. I think they've all got defeats in them.
Bristol City are the team who feel like they're tracking in the right direction at this stage of the season. When I'm looking down that list, West Brom are solid but not spectacular. Bristol City have a bit of momentum. Then there's Boro. Blackburn, lost 4 of the last 5. It feels to me unlikely now that Blackburn are going to get back on track. I'm not gonna completely rule them out, because I know how videos get clipped up and knocked around these days, and the last thing we want is to be made to look daft or more daft. Season. Blackburn, I'm not convinced Watford are good enough to string the runs together. Millwall and Sheffield Wednesday, I know they're only 6 points off. They feel like outsiders. I think it's one from West Brom, Bristol City, Boro. And this is what it comes down, like, Boro are right. They're at home to Oxford next. Boro are right in it. It comes back to really what we've talked about in countless recent videos and what we said at the start of this. Are they good enough? Can you trust them to string together 3-4 wins come the end of the season?
That's exactly it. And which of those 3 sides are the more likely to do that? I would be worried about West Brom, I think. And I'm with you. They're solid. They're definitely not great. You know, they're no great shakes. I just wonder if the whole Mowbray thing might be a factor here. You know, one of those football stories. They're the team I think I'd kind of fear most. But my main point out of all of that is I don't think any of them are going to win 5 on the spin. Coventry might. I'm with you. Coventry might, and they might completely get themselves out of it. I don't think any of the others are going to.
I'm trying to work out here whether we've done enough to hang this on a bold playoff predictions, promotion prediction, or whether we've kind of got round it but sat on the fence a little bit. This is Boro's next 5 fixtures running across the bottom there if you're watching on YouTube. Oxford home, Blackburn away. That's the Friday night now. Leeds home, Millwall away, Plymouth home. That isn't a dreadful run, that. Oxford at home, you've got to win, haven't you, if you want to get in the top 6. Blackburn are in a bad run of form. The pressure is clearly all going to be on Leeds in that game, regardless.
I mean, that to me is your absolute classic run of 5 championship matches, where there is quite literally just a little bit of everything in there, isn't there? There's 2 home games, Oxford and Plymouth, against teams who haven't historically really been in the championship. You know, I'm not up there challenging for promotion. Straight away, 6 points. Well, Boro are not going to get 6 points from those games the way that this season's gone. Then you've got Blackburn away. Tough game, but against a side who are not in form, but are a playoff rival. You've got Leeds at home, the class side in the division, but maybe by then will be having a real wobble. But can Boro beat them at home? And then you've got Millwall away, which is Millwall away, the Den. God only knows.
And a rival
as well. So, I don't know. I look at that list of games, and my main thought about that list of games is I would not feel confident about boldly predicting Boro's chances in any of those games.
Oh, I mean, like you say there, what Boro on 54 points now, aren't they? And
Yeah,
we go back to this thing. If you get in having finished on less than 70 points, you're lucky, aren't you? You've got to be aiming for 70 points as your target. Well, Boro need to get 16 points then. If that's the case, Plymouth and Oxford 6 points surely are absolute musts.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because if you're dropping points in those kind of games, then straight away you're kind of saying, well, you're probably then either going to have to win at Ewood Park or beat Leeds to kind of make up that. You know what I mean? I mean, so what we're saying 16 points, aren't we? This is going to be my horrendous maths. 16 points with 8 games left. Well, actually, that's not horrendous maths, is it? It's literally 2 points a game. So what we're saying is, from the run of 5,
24 is a big ask.
10 points from those 5. Well, if you're not getting 6 from Oxford and Plymouth, that's already piling huge pressure on the 2 away games and the Leeds home game, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a big ask, but then all the teams really are in a similar position, aren't they? Clearly, Bristol City and West Brom are better off because they're 3 points better off, but they're also needing wins to get over the line. You're going to do a piece later this week, aren't you? Kind of comparing the run-ins from various games, and that'll be interesting, I think, just to
look at some key games and kind of how the squads are looking, and you know what the bookies think, all that kind of stuff. We'll wrap all that up towards the end of the week, because it is hard. It is hard at the minute to see where the springer from the pack's going to be. But there will be one. You know, I all joking aside, I said they're all look at all of muchness. Yeah, they do. But beneath Coventry, there will be one team in there that does manage to go better than 2 points a game, and will clearly be the one that ends up doing it. Can it be Boro?
Just a quick one before we finish. After the game, or before the game last week against Luton, I'd got in touch with Luton and asked if there was any chance of speaking to Isaiah Jones. And Luton understandably said, like, look, not before the game because of the predicament they're in, the position they're in, the kind of focus needs to be on Luton. Completely get it. It was an email sent through hope rather than expectation, really. Anyway, after the game on Saturday, Luton's press officer gave us a shout over and he brought Isaiah Jones in to speak to the media. And he spoke at length, Jones, about his time at Boro, leaving, Michael Carrick's support when he was going through his difficult time a couple of seasons ago, the fans' support and the message at the training ground. He was really, really good. And the press officer came in afterwards and said that Jones was really thankful for the opportunity to say thanks to Boro and to Boro's fans, because he felt like he didn't have the chance to do that when he left. We're going to write it for the weekend, so the interview, keep your eyes peeled, and it'll be there at the weekend. But fair play to Luton for letting us do that. I think there aren't loads of clubs who were second bottom in the Championship in that sort of position and would come in and do that. And to Jones, he was great.
Jones, exactly.
He was brilliant. So. Good to see him playing. You know, for Jones's sake, you'd like to see Luton stay up, but keep your eyes peeled for the weekend. And just thanks again, really. Fair play to Luton for letting us do that. That was great.
Yeah, well, that will be on the Northern Echo website. So support us if you can. Every time you click on one of our stories, have a read of it. That helps. If you can subscribe to the website, then that's brilliant. Go along the bottom there. It's £4 for 4 months, or 40% off an annual subscription. That will get you a ad-light version of the website, so much easier to use. And it'll also get you a page-turner app, so you can see what the kind of print product looks like, how all the stories are presented, all that kind of stuff. It is well worth it. Help us out if you can. Right, well, we'll have another one of these vids next week, when obviously we'll be well into the international break, and that will be a proper look ahead to the Oxford game. Hopefully we might have a bit more idea by then of who might be in and around the team for that Oxford game. Until then, have a good weekend. Obviously no Boro, but still plenty going on. Keep an eye on the Echo website, and we'll see you again next week for some more You Are My Boro.